It all started with what seemed like a harmless conversation, the kind that usually comes and goes without much noise. But this time, one comment lit a match that set the entire internet on fire. When Eddie Murphy was asked about Kevin Hart allegedly breaking his stand-up box office record, the response wasn't loud or aggressive, it was calm, almost amused. And that's what made it hit harder. Eddie didn't argue numbers, he didn't rant, he simply questioned reality itself. What record? Where? How? With just a few sentences, Eddie reminded everyone that Raw is still the highest-grossing stand-up concert film in history, untouched for decades. And suddenly, what Kevin had been claiming didn't sound like confidence anymore. It sounded like revisionist history. That moment forced people to pause and ask a bigger question. Why does this keep happening? Why do multiple comedians feel the need to correct the same narrative when it comes to Kevin Hart? And more importantly, why does anyone who challenges him end up dragged, dismissed, or labeled bitter? That single exchange didn't just reopen old wounds, it exposed a tension that had been quietly building for years, waiting for the right moment to explode. Long before Eddie Murphy ever entered the conversation, the friction between Kevin Hart and Cat Williams was already boiling beneath the surface. This wasn't a sudden disagreement or a one-off misunderstanding. It was a clash of philosophies. Cat represented the old-school grind, years of touring, bombing on stage, clawing his way into relevance through raw talent and refusal to compromise. Kevin, on the other hand, seemed to arrive fully packaged, moving from opportunity to opportunity with unusual speed. Cat had been saying for years that something about Kevin's rise didn't add up. Not because Kevin wasn't funny, but because the system appeared to bend in his favor in ways it didn't for others. When Cat spoke about it, he wasn't emotional. He was methodical. He pointed out timelines. He asked questions no one wanted to answer. How does a comedian move to Hollywood and land a sitcom and a starring movie role almost immediately? Why did doors open for one person while others were told to wait their turn? At first, people brushed it off as jealousy, but over time, the consistency of Cat's claims made it harder to ignore, and once the audience started connecting those dots, the tension stopped looking personal and started looking structural. Then there was the subject that made everyone uncomfortable, the recurring pattern of black male comedians being asked to wear dresses in major productions. For years, it was dismissed as harmless comedy, just another trope. But when Dave Chappelle spoke openly about refusing to participate in it, the conversation shifted. Dave described the pressure, the subtle manipulation, and the way boundaries were tested under the guise of humor. His refusal wasn't dramatic, it was principled. He believed comedy didn't require humiliation. That statement alone forced people to look back and reevaluate moments they had laughed at without questioning. Kevin Hart was asked about this directly and said he would never do it. He emphasized boundaries, branding, and self-respect. And for a brief moment, people believed him. But months later, Kevin appeared on SNL wearing a dress, a wig, and fully leaning into the very thing he said he wouldn't do. That contradiction didn't just raise eyebrows, it shattered trust. The issue wasn't the dress itself, it was the reversal, the ease with which a hard line became flexible. And once people noticed that shift, they began wondering what else had been compromised along the way. When Cat Williams responded to Kevin wearing the dress, his tone wasn't explosive. He didn't insult, he didn't attack. He simply stated that Kevin had done exactly what he said he wouldn't. That should have been the end of it. But Kevin took it personally. Instead of addressing the point, he went after Cat's life, his struggles, and his past, framing Cat as someone who sabotaged his own success. The conversation shifted from industry practices to character assassination. Kevin painted himself as disciplined and professional while portraying Cat as irresponsible and unreliable. And for a while, the narrative stuck. Studios had already stopped calling Cat. Media platforms echoed Kevin's version of events. Responsibility became the buzzword. But what people missed was the power imbalance. Kevin wasn't just defending himself, he was speaking from a position of protection. When someone with industry backing frames the story, it becomes official history. And Kat, once again, was pushed to the margins. But silence doesn't erase truth, it only delays it. Years later, Cat Williams resurfaced in a way no one expected. Sitting calmly on Club Shay Shay, he didn't rant. He didn't seek sympathy. He explained. He talked about industry plants, about people who arrive already backed by systems that guarantee success. He questioned how Kevin's career unfolded so quickly and why no one in comedy could recall the usual grind stories associated with him. Kat explained that the job of someone who made a deal is to act like it never happened. According to him, denial is part of the contract. That conversation changed everything. Clips went viral, people revisited old interviews, patterns emerged. Kat wasn't just venting, he was documenting. And once the audience started looking at Kevin's career through that lens, the narrative cracked wide open. Kat then revealed the moment he believes cost him everything. While filming Friday After Next, he refused to perform a scene involving violation played for laughs. He didn't argue loudly, he didn't storm off set, he respectfully said no. He believed some things were never funny. That decision, according to Kat, marked him as difficult. Soon after, roles he had lined up disappeared. Scripts he had reviewed went to someone else, and that someone was Kevin Hart. Not because Kevin stole them, but because he didn't object. He didn't ask for changes. He did what was written. Kat framed this not as bitterness, but as consequence. In Hollywood, standards come at a cost, and Kat paid his in full. The industry moved on, but the story didn't end there. As people started digging deeper, Kevin's past associations came under scrutiny, especially his relationship with Diddy. Old videos resurfaced, parties, jokes that aged badly, moments that felt off in hindsight. Kevin had once hosted a private party with Diddy in New York, the same setting later associated with disturbing allegations. One clip showed a woman catching fire while people laughed and kept filming. Kevin was there, silent. Another interview resurfaced where Diddy made comments about sharing beds with a young usher. Kevin laughed nervously. Years later, when paparazzi asked Kevin about Diddy, his demeanor changed instantly. Questions about restaurants were answered freely. Questions about Diddy were dodged. Faces tightened, cars sped off. Silence spoke louder than denial. Despite all of this, Eddie Murphy had stayed neutral until Kevin claimed to have broken his record. Eddie's response wasn't angry, but it was definitive. He corrected the claim without hostility, reminding everyone that records don't disappear just because someone says they did. Yet later, Eddie seemed to dismiss Kat's warnings, calling them jealousy. That contradiction confused people. Why validate Kevin's ambition, but dismiss Kat's concerns? Rumors began circulating that Eddie had advised Kat to stop engaging, warning him that Kevin was protected. Whether true or not, it aligned with reality. Eddie had survived the industry. He understood its rules, and his silence afterward said more than his words ever could. By the end of it all, the question wasn't whether Kevin Hart was talented. It was whether success in Hollywood comes without invisible strings. Tat Williams may have lost roles, but he kept his standards. Kevin gained everything, but now faces questions that won't go away. Eddie Murphy stands as a reminder that longevity doesn't require compromise, but survival often requires silence. And the audience is left to decide which path truly wins. Was Kat warning people too early, or did he simply refuse to play along? One thing is certain. This story isn't about comedy anymore. It's about power, access, and the price of saying no.